In this video, we are going to talk about the ugly side of graded comics. Stay tuned. Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to spend some time talking about the ugly side of graded comics. And there are some people out there that will say that I am talking out of both sides of my mouth because I talk about the pros of graded comics, and now I'm going to talk about the negatives of graded comics. Well, the reality is that I do what most people do, which is to look at both sides of a situation, to look at both the good and the bad, because I firmly believe that there is some positives that come with the negatives and some negatives that come with the positives. And so it's important to evaluate both sides of every situation. So it is in that spirit that we are going to talk about some of the negatives that come with graded comics. And the first one, which is probably the most obvious, is that once a comic is graded, you can no longer read that comic. One of the wonderful things about comic books is that they are a great source of entertainment. It's something that you can flip through and read and appreciate the story and the art and the dialogue. But once a comic has been encapsulated in plastic, that is no longer something that you can do. And yes, there are options to actually read the comic. You can read it digitally, for example, but there is nothing like that comic book smell. You know what I'm talking about. You can close your eyes right now and smell that comic. We all know the smell. As soon as you walk into a comic book shop, it permeates the air. If you have a comic book room, it permeates the air. If you flip through the comic, you know that smell, and it is a wonderful smell. But once a comic is encapsulated, you no longer have the ability to enjoy that. And so this is something that has to be acknowledged. You cannot read them. You cannot smell them. You cannot appreciate the interior art. That has to be mentioned. The second thing that I want to mention is that now that comics are graded, it creates a situation in which they can be viewed as alternative forms of investment. And this is actually something that I've spoken about repeatedly on the channel for the last couple of years. And most recently, I did a video in which I spoke about the fact that ultra high net worth individuals are viewing comics as an alternative form of investment, the same way that they view cars and purses and watches and wine. They are looking at comics and collectibles, and they are investing heavily. And I should say that it's not just high net worth individuals that are doing this. There are also corporations that are doing the same. And yes, there is some good that comes along with this type of investment, but there are also some negatives as well. And a lot of folks will highlight the trickle down effect of what is happening. Put another way, because people are investing in these ultra high end comics and driving up the prices of those books, that has a trickle-down effect to other books. It increases the overall value, which means that if you are a true collector reader, then you are having to spend more in order to actually get the books that you really want. And so that is definitely a negative that has to be acknowledged. And again, there is some good that comes with that, but there is also a lot of bad as well. The third thing that I want to highlight is a very practical thing. There are a lot of people that don't have a ton of space. And without a doubt, graded comics take up a lot more space than raw comics. When you look at these two boxes of comics side by side, you have a graded bin that holds roughly 30 comics compared to a raw bin that can accommodate roughly 150 comics. That is an important difference. It really is. And so you have to think about the ramifications of storage. Where are you going to put these? If space is at a premium, where do you put them? Versus, again, raw comics where you can cram a lot more into a bin. So again, not as impactful maybe as some of the other things that I may mention in this video, but nevertheless an important one that has to be flagged. Cost is another important factor that has to be mentioned if you're talking about the negatives associated with grading comics. And I've actually created a couple of videos as of late that go into a lot more detail as to the costs associated with shipping a book, getting it clean, pressed, graded, and then shipped back to you. I'm not going to go into those details here because that other video is out there for your viewing pleasure. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely want to encourage you to check it out. But cost is an important factor. The same can be said for turnaround time. If you have to wait around a year to have a book come back, that is another form of cost that has to be considered. You don't have to worry about those things if you have a raw book and you want to put it in a poly or a mylar, you want to put it in a top loader. So again, cost is an important factor. The last and final thing that I will make mention of is protection. And this is something that I've touted before in previous videos where I've spoken about the pros associated with getting a comic encapsulated, is that it does offer protection, better protection than what you might get with a poly bag or even a mylar. But the reality is that that protection is not 100%. You can still damage a comic even if it is encapsulated. If you drop it, you can crack the case. If you drop it hard enough, you might actually be able to shift and damage that comic, and as a result have to incur additional costs to get that comic reholdered, and you also have to, of course, wait for it to go away and then come back. So protection is not 100%. So there you have it. Those are some of the negatives associated with graded comics. And I will tell you that I'm pretty confident that others out there can come up with some negatives as well. So I definitely want to encourage you to leave those thoughts behind. This video is not about bashing graded comics. That is not what I am attempting to do. But what I am doing is trying to balance out all of the pro graded stuff that I do here on the channel with a little bit of the negatives. Because as I mentioned at the start of this video, there is some good with some bad and some bad with some good. And so it's important for us to reflect upon both of those things so that we can make some informed decisions. And it is in that spirit that I offer this video up. As always, if you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.